The social economy is about empowering people to connect and share resources in the hope that these networks, and not big organizations, will solve a host of problems, be they social, economic, or environmental. Problems that some believe have been ignored or inadequately dealt with by the private and public sectors. Joining us now for more on this trend, Marina Gorbis, author of The Nature of the Future, Dispatches from the Socialstructed World. And we welcome you here to Toronto, all the way from sunny California.
Right. Great to be here,
It's
Steve.
great to have you here.
My first time in Toronto.
Is that right?
Yep.
Oh, man,
Yep.
long overdue.
Yeah, exactly.
Long overdue. Well, we're happy to have you here. Okay, The Nature of the Future. That title, I just want to ask you about that, whether you did that on purpose, because in 1937 there was an economist named Ronald Coase, who published an article, The Nature of the Firm. So you're playing off that, I presume.
Absolutely.
How
That's
so?
Exactly.
What's the message?
So Ron Coase in 1937 wrote this article called The Nature of the Future, in which he posed a very simple question.
He did The Nature of the Firm.
The nature of the firm, exactly. He asked the question, why do we need companies? Why do we need corporations or organizations in general? Why not people just trading with each other and produce and trade as individuals? And what the answer was, it's because of transaction costs. So as you increase the scale of your operations, as you're producing more, you need to manage more resources, more people, you need to hire layers of management to coordinate all of that. So those are all your transaction costs. So to scale up production, you need an organization to basically achieve that kind of scale. So you can think of organizations as a kind of technology, actually, that allows you to produce at great scales while minimizing costs.
But that is
changing. Is changing. That technology, if you think of organizations as a kind of technology, that technology is being disrupted.
Okay, so how is the technology shifting away from a world where we need sort of old-fashioned corporations to produce the goods and services that we need and use every day?
So if you think about these transaction costs and coordination costs, those costs are sometimes almost at zero or very low. So what our technology and technology infrastructure allows us to do is basically coordinate those activities without layers and layers of management. So an example of something like that, you have an idea for a product, something you want to produce. Maybe you go to a place like Tech Shop, which has all the equipment that you need to produce the product, plus a community of people who can support you and give you advice. You can go to Tech Shop, prototype the idea. Then you can go to Kickstarter, instead of going to the bank where you can raise money to basically help you manufacture the product, and plus you have a community that will use the product. And then maybe you can find distributed networks of people who can manufacture this product either in China or in the US. So basically you have access to the resources that previously only large organizations had, but you can be one person or two people.
Okay, this is where I put my sort of old fuddy-duddy, old economy, old fart hat on and say, you live in Silicon Valley and it's all well and good for you to say that because that's the nature of the lifestyle out there, but how about for the rest of the world, which kind of participates overwhelmingly still in the old-fashioned real economy? Is what you've just described really an option for them?
Absolutely. I mean, access to technology is a big part of it. And the people who have access, I mean, if you look at cell phones and mobile technology, increasingly most people around the world have access to those technologies. So a lot of people are already participating. If you look at Wikipedia, the people who are contributed, it's translated into hundreds of languages, right? So people have access from all around the world to this kind of infrastructure.
But nobody makes money from that.
Nobody makes money from that. Exactly. Well, some people are making money on ads from that, and not in Wikipedia, but in other kinds of platforms. And that's a really interesting challenge because so many of the ways in which we contribute to this is not monetized. So we're taking our free time, or what Clay Shirky calls cognitive surplus, and contributing to all these free things. And a lot of times it's not monetized.
No, it's clearly improving the culture, the smarts of our society. It adds so much. I mean, Wikipedia did. Try to imagine a world today, or try to imagine a student doing a project for school or anything without Wikipedia. But yeah, it's hard to get paid for a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Isn't that a I mean, that's a real problem in terms of transforming our economy, isn't it?
It may be a problem, but it may be a good thing because we're demonetizing so many things. So we're clearly, so much of our lives, we forget that so much of our lives is spent in demonetized economy, in what I call gift economy, and what people know as a gift economy. So when your mother invites you for dinner, occasionally, hopefully, and makes a dinner for you, you don't give her, you don't pay her, right? But she produced something that's valuable, right? So already a lot of our lives are spent in these gift economies with friends, with colleagues, with others. So in many ways, we're creating these new communities in which we are basically using the principles of the gift economy. So longer term, if you look at it longer term, there are many possibilities. We can't predict the future, and I'm going to be the first one to tell you this.
You're going to tell us the nature of the future, but you can't be sure.
I can't predict. And in the nature of the future, I talk about different possibilities. It's possible that more of our activities will move into these kind of sharing or gift economies. It's possible that we're going to be creating new kinds of currencies around social connections and social relationships. Or you know, in the dark scenario, it's possible that we will be contributing what's called digital serfdom. We will be contributing, we're all working for Facebook and Twitter, right? But we're not getting paid for our work.
Okay,
right?
Those are big ideas which I want to follow up on in a second, because I want to follow up on one more thing when it comes to the old economy. When you talk to business leaders in the old economy, and from any number of different sectors, and you try to find out from them what's the most common hang-up they have when it comes to considering incorporating new technology and what they do to enable them to be sort of more cutting edge, what's the thing they always point to?
I think the biggest hang-up is it's very hard to change legacy systems, legacy thinking, and legacy organizations. So when I talk to organizations, I always say, look at every part of your operation and think about how you would organize it today. If you didn't have that legacy, if you had today's set of technologies, today's set of tools, today's set of ideas, how would you do it?
Okay, our viewers may detect just a wee hint of an accent with you. So they were probably going to be asking me to ask you how this had significance in what you do right now. You immigrated to the United States from Ukraine. You were a teenager at the time. And did being an immigrant help you understand the future in a way that, say, somebody who's born and raised in the same country would not have been able to do?
Yes.
You think yes?
Absolutely. I think it's very helpful. One thing is that, of course, one thing I learned is that nobody can predict the future, because being in Ukraine when I was 10 years old, I would have never predicted, or nobody could have predicted, that I would end up in Silicon Valley and thinking about being a futurist. I don't think anybody where I grew up knew that such a thing existed.
Well, you wouldn't have predicted the end of the Soviet Union, never mind that.
Well, there were some people who were predicting that, but not me. I was too young. But I always say that, you know, being an immigrant is kind of a blessing and a curse. It's kind of a curse when people hear my accent inevitably and say, well, where are you from? And I have to say, from California, because I spent most of my life there. But in terms of being a futurist, I see it as a blessing, because as an immigrant, when you come from a different culture, you have to learn a whole new different way of thinking. You need to learn different norms. You need to learn different ways of relating to people. And that's very helpful when you think about the future, because we're all immigrants to the future. None of us are natives in the future land, right? We're all immigrating to the new land with probably a new set of rules. So it's kind of easier when you're an immigrant to think about migrating to a new land where you have to learn a new set of rules, a new language, a new way of relating to things.
Opens you up to everything, doesn't it?
It does open you up.
Mark Kingwell, I'm not sure if you know him. He's a philosopher at the University of Toronto, and we had him on this program several months ago. And I want to play you a little snippet of something he had to say on that program, and then we'll come back and chat, okay?
Okay.
Control room, rotate, please.
There are some interesting studies that have just come out recently, last couple of years, that show that people who use social media a lot, particularly young people, demonstrate empathy deficits when they're tested. That's to say, they care less about other people the more they use these media.
How come?
The causes are a little bit unclear, but it seems to me that we could speculate that the more you are, as it were, tuned into the palm of your hand, the less you care about the world around you. You might think that that's communicating, but it's actually all about you. So there is a sort of a presupposition of narcissism, which is constantly reinforced by that focus on the palm.
If you look at our parliaments in Canada today, you will see the Prime Minister or the Premier get up and give an answer in question period, and then behind him, you'll see everybody else with their faces in their BlackBerries answering their whatever correspondence. And I mean, you see this, I'm sure, all the time in California, people walking down the streets and they've got their heads down. Do you think as we get more plugged in some respects, we become less empathetic to the world around us?
I think that what happens when you introduce new technologies, there's kind of a social lag as we adjust to these technologies. So even the measurements we use, like I've seen studies around empathy and how you measure empathy and what empathy is a concept in itself that probably is changing. So a lot of times we measure old things, but in a new environment. But obviously there is concern about empathy and the fact that we don't make eye contact. But on the other side of it, you can activate thousands of millions of people when you post a video of Coney, and all these people all of a sudden get energized. Is that empathy? It's a new kind of empathy. And maybe this empathy is being extended to larger networks of people. So it's a different kind of empathy. Maybe our scope of what we're seeing and what we're paying attention to is enlarging also. So I think it's kind of early to say, this is every technology, there is not a technology, I forget who said that every innovation also brings with it a curse. So every technology enables something that's really beneficial, and it creates its own set of challenges. And
but we'd like to know that whatever it is we're giving up will be worth it, that whatever it is we're going to be getting through this disruption will be worth giving up, you know, some of the social norms and the courtesies and so on that we are now giving up. Can you make that commitment to us?
I can't make that commitment to you, but I can tell you that we're developing new sets of courtesies, new sets of norms, new sets of ways of relating to each other, and our sociality in itself, what we think of as being social and how we think about being social is changing also.
Okay, I want to ask you about a couple of things here. Airy gentry and bio-curious.
Yes.
Explain.
Airy is one of those people. I did a whole bunch of interviews when I was writing a book about pioneers of social structing that I talk about in my book, and Airy is one of those people. Airy is somebody I met in Silicon Valley. She was in her 20s, not a scientist by background, but got really interested in science, in biology, and was frustrated that not more people were interested and could engage in biology research. So she and a couple of friends, she moved to Silicon Valley, she and a couple of friends went to various flea markets, on eBay, garage sales. A lot of companies were going out of business during the recession. They bought lab equipment, put it in their house, and said, anybody who is interested in doing biology research, come and work with us in this garage. And people did show up, some of them credentialed scientists, some of them complete amateurs, teenagers, older people. Soon they grew out of the garage. They didn't have enough space. They went to Kickstarter, got funding to start a community lab, and it's now an operating community biology lab where people can come. It's a membership organization. People can come and they can work together and they can do projects, they can do research. And again, it's a cross-section of people who have access to this. They're doing classes now, they're organizing classes around biology. And so this is a great example of something that you think of, biology research. It can only be done in universities. It can only be done in R&D labs. And here are these people who are basically with very little money, very few resources, put together this lab that in some ways is competing with some other labs or doing the kind of things that no lab could do.
This is part of a new world which you called a social-structed world. I think we need a definition of what you mean when you say social-structed.
Yeah, I had to fight to keep that word. It's hard to pronounce.
Did you make it up?
I made it up, sort of. But there are two concepts that I wanted to communicate with this word. One is that we are building, we're structuring something, we're building something. And when we build something new, we don't destroy the foundation on which it exists. We build on top of existing organizations, on top of existing structures. And the way we're doing is through social connections. through social technologies, through connections with each other. So it's structuring something new through these social ties.
Okay, we asked about Eri Gentry, that's E-R-I, Gentry. Now I want to ask you about the Romanian journalist Paul Radu and how he was able, again, through this new social-structed world, to investigate organized crime.
Yes, one of my favorite people. Paul is a Romanian journalist who's done a lot of work investigating human trafficking, human rights violations, and other kinds of things. He was a Knight Fellow at Stanford. That's how I met him. And he and other journalists, particularly in that part of the world, what they know is that global crime is a huge global enterprise. And it uses this familiar sort of structures, business structures, banking structures, companies, registrations, all kinds of things. And it has sort of global reach. So the problem with that for authorities is that it's hard to see all of the links between these different structures. So, you know, a drug bust happened in Argentina. They uncover cocaine, they smuggle, they arrest a few people, but it turns out they're connected to a whole network of other people who may be operating from Romania and from Ukraine and from some other place in Asia. And so what these guys did is they created, it's called an ID project, and it's basically allows you, it's a group of journalists who are collaborating to say, okay, I can look up company registrations in Delaware, but I can also trace them to Romania. So they're working virtually and using this information to really uncover big global crime.
Who pays them?
It's a not-for-profit organization. They're paid very little. They're working as journalists, some of them in other newspapers and other publications. They're paid very, very little. What's interesting, though, we at the Institute, we do yearly a session with the Knight journalists, Knight Fellows, and about the future of journalism. And so Paul was in that group, and American journalists were all complaining about how, you know, what's happening in journalism, jobs are disappearing and all of that, and how do you make a living? And Paul kind of said, you know, we don't think about that. There is this incredible need for this to happen. So we kind of think about, this is a passion-driven enterprise.
Well, this is where I'm going. What is it about these folks that they're prepared to basically work for free? Why do they do it?
Well, they're not working for free. They're scrambling. You know, they're getting grants here and there. They're doing journalistic projects. They're doing all kinds of other things. And hopefully, they'll get enough funding for the not-for-profit to maintain what they're doing. But they're not looking for big money. They're looking to support themselves and be viable.
Well, but that's it. They're not, it's a different economic headspace, I guess, because they're not motivated by getting the big story because that'll impress the publisher because then they'll get a big raise or a new title or something like that. They're motivated by a whole new set of criteria.
Right.
Why?
Because they are motivated by a whole different set of criteria.
But where does that come from?
We all have that, right? Do you have things that you're totally passionate about that you would do no matter if somebody paid you or not?
Sure, but I'd still need to, I still need something where I knew I could make a living.
Absolutely. But if you have that, if we all had some areas where we could dedicate our resources to something that we're passionate about, and we can amplify that, that would have a huge impact, right?
Okay, but if everybody's working for bubkas, which is a currency that I think is traded somewhere in the world.
Right.
If we're all working for bubkas in a social-structed world, how does anybody have any money to pay for anything and keep our economy going?
Well, right now, this is where we are. The people who, a lot of people who are working for the social-structed world, you know, we've had not-for-profit, more people in the U.S. work for non-profit organizations that work for for-profit organizations.
But they get paid.
They get paid, right. So a lot of sort of energy is moving in that direction. Wikipedia is a not-for-profit organization. People do get paid. So a lot of these kind of not-for-profit businesses are being created where people are not probably looking for a huge financial payoff, but they're looking to do something really, really meaningful to them and get paid for it. So, and the possibilities are there for that to happen. So one possibility is that, you know, a lot of our cognitive surplus and our cognitive attention is going to move to those kind of activities. So in some ways, it's sort of rebalancing of how we spend our time, maybe more of our time, and more people will be, there's research that shows young people are really interested and in doing meaningful things in the world.
I totally appreciate that, and that's a laudable goal. It's a wonderful thing that somebody would be prepared to put aside the big payday because they're very passionate about moving the yardsticks on a particular issue. But you did use this expression earlier that I now want to come back to, which is, do you worry that we're on the verge of creating a world where we're all pursuing our passions, and that's all wonderful and lovely, but we're all a bunch of digital serfs and nobody's making any money?
I worry about it, absolutely. And this is something we're in the early stages of this, and there is a possibility that of this digital serfdom. And we need to think about, on the government level, how do we deal with something like that? How do we deal, what kind of welfare system, what kind of social system do we need to create to accommodate that? Is this a transition to something completely different? You know, people are experimenting in Europe. There's talks about, in Switzerland, about guaranteed basic income. In India, there are experiments in that. There are experiments in sharing and gift economies at the local level. So there's a lot of experimentation that is taking place. Hopefully we're not going to move into that world of digital serfdom. Hopefully we'll find some other ways of sort of thinking about economy and our relationship.
Well, let me pick up another example that you had in the book, which is, and it's a very neat idea. You know, you've got a typical neighborhood where, let's say there's 20 houses on the street. And, you know, you've got 20 lawnmowers and 20, you know, pliers and 20 screwdrivers and everything. And I gather the Socialstructed World has a different approach, which is, look, we don't all need 20 lawnmowers. Yeah. Let's buy 2 and we can all just share.
Right.
Which is a neat idea, except you're going to put the people who make the lawnmowers out of business, or, you know, half the staff is going to get laid off because nobody's buying enough lawnmowers anymore. So a neat idea, but with potentially grave consequences. How do we figure this out?
And maybe there's going to be more areas where those people can dedicate their resources to. So sharing economy is growing. If you look at what's happening with car services, particularly in the metropolitan area, there's so many of these now around. Neighbor Goods is another one, organization where you can do things like that, borrow lawnmower and other kinds of things. We have abundance of resources. You know, we have abundance of space, we have abundance of housing, we have abundance of all kinds of things, of stuff, right? So now, because you can coordinate and you can find who has what, it's easier for people to tap into those resources. You know, at the Institute for the Future, we had an interesting experiment. We realized during the recession, we have abundance of physical space, and it's good space for meetings. So we started opening it up to co-working. So every month, we would invite people to co-work with us. And people came, and this kind of space that was unused, underutilized, all of a sudden it became useful to people. And as a result, we got so much back from it. You know, people were really excited about being in the Institute. Our people made connections with people who were coming in. So you get so much in return.
Well, let's finish up on this, because this may speak to what you're referring to here. Jonathan Haidt, whom I'm sure you know, he was on this program not too long ago, the happiness hypothesis. He writes, "We are, in a way, like bees. Our lives only make full sense as members of a larger hive, or as cells in a larger body. Yet in our modern way of living, we've busted out of the hive and flown out on our own, each one of us free to live as we please. Most of us need to be part of a hive in some way, ideally a hive that has a clearly noble purpose." He's speaking to what you just referred to,
right.
So you're on side with him on this.
Absolutely. I think that what these social-structed efforts tap into is our desire to be a part of something bigger, part of something meaningful to us. And it's a different kind of way of creating value. You know, we've been thinking about economics, and we've been thinking about making ourselves efficient from the point of view of economic efficiency, but it hasn't been really socially efficient. So we have become isolated, we have become separated, and now we're sort of reweaving ourselves into something different that brings us together. In my neighborhood now, there are Yahoo groups, and there are all kinds of ways that people are reconnecting and are able to borrow things from each other and do things together and see who's doing what and who needs what. So it's sort of reweaving ourselves in some new ways.
Well, Marina, we are not done talking. That's just the end of part one, because
Okay.
we're going to have you come back next week and we're going to talk about some more. That's The Nature of the Future, Dispatches from a Social-Structed World by Marina Gorbis. Thanks very much for today.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.